Hello, everyone. I am Alicia Dubois. I am currently the Kingdom Web Minister. And well, I guess I have been the Web Minister for 2.5 years, almost. Tonight, we're going to talk about writing for the web. Last night, we talked about introduction to WordPress and the basics, and there will be a video for that soon. And there were a few times where we came up against some things that were more writing focused, and I was originally going to deliver that content last night, but I'm really glad that I saved it for tonight because it's a much bigger topic than I originally thought it was. Basically every time I tried to wrap up my notes about it, I came across another thing that I should really talk about, and I was just like, it seemed like one more thing and one more thing and one more thing, and I'm like, oh, this is growing and growing. So tonight we're going to start out talking about writing for the web, and then I also said that I would talk about images, and I may beg off of that tonight. I've had a headache pretty much all day, so we'll see where we get to with writing. And images is a much smaller topic, actually. So I could just record something independently and put it with this presentation later when I post it. So we'll see. And if you have specific image questions, I'm not going to refuse to answer them, but maybe we will save the discussion about optimizing images for later. But anyway, I don't have fancy slides tonight. I have a good outline and a lot of notes to go by. But I want to avoid this being a lecture. So we are going to there's some interactivity here. If you do have something in mind that you want to write about, or that you want to use as an experimental topic for this class or for this exercise, that's great. If not, you might want to be thinking about it, because there are some exercises that we can go through to help get you started writing something. I do have, in terms of a slideshow, like I said, I didn't have slides, but I do have an outline. Where did that go? No, sorry, bear with me a second here. Yes, okay, now I can share it. Just so you know, the outline of where we're going. Oh, why do you make this full screen every time? Okay. Writing for the web. No. There we go. Okay. Overview of tonight and what we're going to talk about. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about how we read on the web, how we consume information on the web. Then we're going to talk about how to plan your content, and that's where your ideas will come in. And then a whole section about publishing quality content, and what that means. So let's start with how we read things on the web. Okay, common behaviors. So there's a lot of research out there that, and there will be, again, a resources section that has links to lots of rich resources from this presentation. But there's been a lot of research conducted by Nielsen Norman Group, that has been done since about 1997, that shows how people read web pages. And the short answer is they don't. They don't read web pages. They scan. They scan for headings and keywords that helps them hone in on exactly what they're looking for. People are reading web pages to inform themselves generally, and leaving shopping-based interactions aside, people search the web for information, and they are quickly trying to find that information. Initially, they did those studies with interviewing people afterwards. And now they have this very snazzy technology called eye scan technology, where they can actually tell where your eyes went on the page and when. So you get these maps that show dots of what people looked at and in what order. And they found that even across different cultures and different languages, people scan content in particular patterns. And that is very important to know when you're writing for the web, because it will change the structure of your writing. Yeah, okay, so often people who are scanning don't even want to scroll. So it's really important to make your points early and sort of hook the reader. There's a phrase above the fold, which is used a lot in web development or web content creation. And that refers to the days of newspapers, where anything above the fold of the newspaper was what people read first. And they'll scan those headlines and decide what they want to read first, right? So we use that term in web development or web content creation to describe the content that appears on the visitor's screen, whatever screen they're using, because now it can be their desktop or their tablet or their phone, or those are the major ones. And whatever is in their field of vision is what they're going to start with. So if you take up most of that space with images, they have to scroll down to get to the content. It only takes a second to lose a reader. So you have to be really choosy about how you structure your pages so that you're not losing your visitors. And the users will scroll. Like I don't want to leave you with a completely dejected and cynical view of web readers. They will scroll, but they have to be interested enough to do that. So if what's above the fold is promising, they'll keep going. But it's very rare that people, I think it was something like 17% of people will read all the way through. Most people scan. Digital and literacy skills. So surprising to me was that the average American reads at between a 6th to 12th grade reading level. That was very surprising to me. Web content is usually written at about an 8th grade reading level. And that's to try to reach the widest audience. That is, for reference, at about the level of the Harry Potter books. So depending on your audience, you don't want to overwhelm people with deep, complex topics. The more general the audience you want to write for, the more simple you need to make the concepts and ideas. And I think that part of that is not just literacy, but part of that is patience. We have been trained and conditioned by web content to scan and to be able to sift through information quickly. And if we can't get the general idea from the first couple of things that we read, then we're just going to move on because somebody else has probably done that. Planning. I don't know if anyone else works in a job or industry where planning is important, but this is incredibly important. Planning what you're going to write about and planning, considering these things is going to make a huge difference in your writing. The first thing to think about, we've already touched on, is audience. Audience means who are you writing this for? Who's going to be reading this information? what level of information are they interested in? Are they already familiar with your topic, or are they not familiar with this world at all? And they've just stumbled upon something that might be tangential to their interests, or that's something that's completely new to them. You want to think about what characteristics your audience has in order to match the content you write to their expectation level, to their education level about your topic, and to be able to capture their attention. What would capture their attention, and what would make them turn away? So first, each of these, I think each of these has an exercise. Most of them do. So this is the first exercise. So if you have a topic that you're thinking about writing about, and last night we talked a lot about the example of a project or a presentation that you've done or made that you might want to put online in like a portfolio sense. So if you have a particular project that you want to write about, or a research paper you've done, or a topic that you're interested in doing more work on, then think about it right now, like open a notebook or a Google Doc or something, and take a couple of minutes to think about who are you writing for? What level of information do they want to know about your topic? Just jot it down. And you don't have to follow along with any of these, but I'm still going to take tea breaks. After I got done last night, I was like, I couldn't even talk. The next thing to think about is the topic. So what is the topic that you want to write about? What are you trying to convey to your reader? Do you want them to be convinced of something? Is it a persuasive type of writing? Are you trying to inform them about something? Are you trying to tell them about the project you did and the process you took? Are you telling more of a story in terms of how you became so interested in this topic, or how you came to decide on doing this project? Yeah, you really want to think about your purpose before you start any writing. Take a minute to think about that and jot down some ideas, like what's your reason for wanting to write this? And what do you want your readers to be informed about or feel at the end of reading assuming that they read the whole thing, like what do you want them to come away with? I'm going to jump back for a second because when I introduced myself, I did not tell you probably, or what I think is enough information. So I am the Kingdom Web Minister right now, and I have been a web professional since 1996. Writing web content is not what I consider one of my strengths. I have stronger strengths than writing. I have seen a lot of bad writing in my time, though, a lot of bad web writing. And I've seen a lot of really good web writing. And I am still improving my own writing. So just to be clear, I do not consider myself the foremost expert on how to best do this. But before I decided to talk about this, I knew some things, like I could list off the top of my head some things that make content easier to read, or tips for writing good web content. But doing the research for this and putting this presentation together really helped me have a good vocabulary around that, and describe the things that I feel make writing for the web effective in a much more logical, much more logical way. Like it made much more sense to me after doing the research behind it. Before I knew the what, I didn't know the why. And now I can help you with the why. All right, so we just talked about topic considerations. Sorry, I didn't say that at the beginning. And next, we're going to talk about keywords. So often we hear the term keywords connected with SEO, or search engine optimization. And that process, that is like a whole field of science unto itself. And that methodology, that area of structuring your content around getting good search engine results is often associated with marketing and sales and promoting your product, trying to get higher rankings than your competitors, and that kind of thing. You know, how can I show up in the top 2 or 3 links in Google? That is not really the focus of the kind of writing that we're talking about here. I will include links to some resources about that in the notes, but it is a complex topic. Everybody wants to be in the top in Google. There are a lot of companies that will sell you consulting packages to help you get there. I am here to tell you that it is an incredibly complex algorithm and that Google changes it often. So, and there are ways to boost your rankings, and there are ways that will bring your rankings down, you know, ways to do things that bring your rankings down. And it's really complicated. If you are trying to make a living from selling something online and you're trying to write content for products or services in order to get good rankings on Google, that is a totally different, this class will help you, but it's not necessarily guaranteed to boost your SEO, if that makes sense. I don't want to make any claims, but you really still do want to think about keywords in your planning process, because you want to have it in mind when before you start writing and before you do your outline, so that you have a clear sense of what you want your readers to come away with. So if you were searching for your article, your post on Google, what kinds of keywords would you be looking up? We talked about tags last night, and tags are keywords. So how would you tag your finished post, even though you haven't written it yet? These are things you can decide ahead of time, and you can know what direction you want to go in. And the place that you start when we're planning, like, is not necessarily where you're going to end up, but it's still a good exercise to try to think about when people find your article, what were they searching for? Were they searching for something like medieval leatherwork, or Roman dietary restrictions, or it's something that you should definitely write down as part of your planning process. The other thing to think about with keywords is summarizing. So if you can come up with a 1 to 2 sentence summary of your topic that is your sort of main point, that is an excellent thing to do in your planning stage. Also, something to shoot for, something to help contain the scope of your writing. Because I don't know about you, but as soon as I start writing, even when I have planned things out and I have an outline, I can get off topic. And when later we talk about editing, you'll want to be able to refer back to what the point was that you wanted to make, and challenge yourself, challenge your writing to see if what you have included still fits with that main topic. So a little exercise for right now is to think of as many keywords as you can to describe what you want to write about. And this is just brainstorming, so just write down whatever you got. Okay, now we're going to talk about pyramid and reverse pyramid. So if you've taken any writing classes or you have written for done a lot of writing for academia, or if you've done any journalism studies or anything like that, you have probably heard of the pyramid model of writing, which is start with your foundation and work your way to the conclusion. Most research papers, engineering type papers, usually a lot of academic papers that we read as hobbyist history lovers, they're written this way. So they start out with a problem statement or a topic, and then they review what has been done before, move into a detailed discussion of different options, how they considered different ways of doing things, weighing the pros and cons of methods used, and then go into the way they did, the method that they used, and then you'll get some results, and then some conclusions, and then maybe next steps. And with the web, you really want to turn that pyramid upside down. And this is called reverse pyramid, and it's a technique that journalists have used for a very long time. Because of that above the fold phenomenon, users can stop reading at any time. So they want to start out with the conclusions or the main point, and then follow it with the most important supporting information, followed by how you got there. So you want to tell people the destination, and then the reason why you arrived at that destination, and then the full details of your journey there. And that's, again, because people will be hooked by the start of your writing, and then they will want to, if they're interested in the topic, they will want to scroll to read all the details that they can consume. The next exercise, I think the last exercise in this section, is to think about what your conclusion is and what are the main ideas, 1 to 3 main ideas that you want people to walk away with if they only read maybe like the first paragraph, second paragraph. And this is like kind of similar to thinking about your summary, but specifically, what's the thing you want to lead with? What's the thing you want to make sure that they walk away with? The last part of this section is just content is part of the World Wide Web. So www at the beginning of all of the URLs, links we see, or a lot of them, stands for World Wide Web. And it's important to think about the fact that the content we write and publish online lasts a long time. And we want to take that into consideration in our writing. It can be used to your advantage. For example, you can link to sources that provide background information that you don't want to have to provide. You don't have to re-explain how some process works, or you just want to get to how you used it. Well, you can link to that, and people can go and read up on the backstory if they want to, or they can just take your word for it and keep going. That can help us be more concise, more brief in our writing on the web, and also to enrich the user's experience if they are interested in deeper information.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When we're writing all of this and we put it up on our site and whatnot, what about copyright?
Oh yeah, copyright is a good That's a good thing to talk about. So when you link to someone else's content on the online, you if you say some if you're citing it, if you're saying something like research from Forrester says blah 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 blah, you can create a link to that article backing up that research and use the words research from Forrester suggests and make that into a link and send people to that reference. That doesn't violate any copyright information or copyright laws. If you are, for example, wanting to republish someone else's article or post in or include posts in a news feed, for example, then you will need to have their permission for that. Many of the big news outfits news agencies will publish content for syndication, which means that you can, under certain agreements, you can republish the article in your news feed. And usually those restrictions are about making sure that credit is given to the right news agency and that you have a link back to them, etc. So for example, the Associated Press works that way, and the big newspapers have syndicated content that you can use like that. But I think maybe you're thinking about things like research papers or images.
Yes.
And
yeah, that, and once my content goes up onto the net, do I automatically have copyright, or do I have to do something to get copyright?
That's a good question. That makes me immediately think of enforcement. Enforcing copyright is very difficult. So let's say, for example, you publish a post on your blog. Someone else takes that content and republishes it under their own name. Like, they don't credit you, they don't link to the content at your website. They copy what's on your page and they paste it into their own post and put their name on it as if they wrote it. Like, they basically just stole your work. What can you do about it? You can look to see whether it was a person, an individual who posted it, or a company who posted it, and you can send them a message that says, hey, you took my content. If you want to use it, use a link, credit me, etc. That's my intellectual property, and you just took it. It's very hard to prove. It is very hard to pursue that. You could go to the company that's hosting their website and say, hey, so if it's a company, they have copyrighted things of their own. Like, they wouldn't want to do that. If it's an individual, which is much more likely, you could go to the company that's hosting their website and say, hey, this person blatantly stole my content, and see if they'll do anything about it. They may ask the person to take it down. They may put pressure on the person to take it down. They may force the person to take it down. But there's not really much you can do if their hosting company is like, meh, we don't care. And it does discourage people from publishing things sometimes. Yeah, there is that.
If it's an image, then can you also watermark it?
Yeah, you can watermark your images for sure. We talked a little bit yesterday about open source software versus proprietary software, and the web itself, and a lot of the content that is published on the web is put out into the public domain. And what that means is that it is available for public consumption and public use. You can sign up to be a member of a website where they give you special content only for paid members. You can be the subscriber to software so that you get software updates and those kinds of things. That's not putting something in the public domain. When you just publish an article about a topic that you're interested in, you're putting that information out for the public to read. Do you want other people using your content if they credit you? I mean, yeah, you do, because then more people will come to your website for those types of things, looking for those types of things. Do you want people taking your images and using them as their own and not giving you credit for using it? No, like that's not very polite. That's not very nice. And you're not perpetuating the community of sharing that is inherent in the web. There are stock image companies, for example, where you can go and you can pay for images of certain things. Like if you really need an image of a polar bear with Aurora Borealis behind it, and you have no means to get to Alaska, and you can't get to a place where you could take one of these pictures yourself. You could never take a picture as nice as you could find. You can buy a picture to have the rights to use it on your website or to use it in print, and copyright laws were originally started to protect print documents and publications. When you're paying for that, you're paying for the talent of the photographer who took the photo, and you're getting the ability to use that photo. So I feel like I've wandered away from the point of your question, but using images is where you will probably run into copyright most often. Museums and universities, libraries, every place that I've ever come across in researching online has had a specific policy about using information from their site and how you're able to use it. There are different types of licenses, multiple categories of licenses. If you're using it for academic research, you can just use it for free. If you are using it for commercial purpose, like if you're trying to make money off of the site that you're putting it on, you may need to pay a fee for that. There may be specific credit requirements, like that you have to give credit to the photographer and the institution that holds the piece of artwork, or the artist and the year, and like it has to be in this format. There are various restrictions, but every institution I've ever come across has this digital media policy that is easily accessed on their website and simple to understand. A lot of museums allow you to download pictures at a certain resolution, but if you want a really, really high quality scan, then you might have to pay for it, or if it's something out of their archives or something like that. I know I've ordered, for example, records from the National Archives in London to get a couple of documents for the handwriting. And I think I ended up paying something like $5 for a couple of digital files. And if that helps keep the resource online and helps them scan more resources to put online, then I'm all for it. So I guess the short answer is you need to check before you use content from another website or from another, especially images. You need to check to make sure that you're allowed to use the image and under what conditions.
Okay, even though I loved all of that information and it answered other questions,
Yeah.
the question I really had is, when we write our blog and
Yep.
then we publish it, are we automatically considered under the copyright laws, or do we have to write like copyright 2002 or whatever? How do we protect ourselves?
Yeah, that's a really good question that I did not foresee. And I don't want to give you an answer that is partial or incorrect. So I'm going to, unless somebody else who's on the call right now has an answer to that, I am going to take that as a note to write down and add to the supplemental information of this class. And thank you for pointing out that I missed that topic completely.
I have a quick search on the copyright laws,
Oh yeah, great.
and it is under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. All content published online is protected under copyright law, regardless of having the copyright symbol on the page. Any content, no matter the form it takes, whether it is digital, print, or media, is protected under copyright law.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did I say that linking to outside sources, studies, research, that kind of thing adds to your credibility as a writer? Because if I didn't, that was the next thing I was going to say. But of course, you should link to it in an ethical way. And I'm actually going to type that in here. And that's kind of what we've been talking about here, the ethics of linking to other resources.
And are those links to resources like within your own website domain, or are those outside of your domain?
You'll gain more credibility by linking to outside of your domain. So like to research studies or to a museum's write up about this object, or to research that you built upon to do your project or things like that. It will help establish you as somebody who has done their research about this topic. And that is a more subtle way of convincing your reader to keep reading. Like, oh, they know what they're talking about. Excellent. Okay, any more questions about that before we move on out of planning? All right. So how do we publish quality content? The short answer is you draft, walk away, edit, and then polish. I feel like walking away is an important step, even though it's not listed here, because you can get yourself down a rabbit hole, you can get off track, you can go on beautiful tangents that can lead you to new topics and new interests and deeper, richer content. And then you have to bring it back and reel it back in to what your intentions were in the planning stages, and really examine whether or not it fits with what your goals are for this piece of writing. I kind of get into the zone, or I draft in pieces, or I want to rearrange things. And I don't know anyone who has the superpower. I have not met anyone yet, because somebody's going to say someday that, like, oh, I'm that person. I've not met anyone with the superpower to be able to just sit down, write something, and feel good about publishing it. Everybody revises. Everybody needs edits. Everybody second guesses whether this paragraph should go before this paragraph, and whether the whole structure of the article has now changed. Your topic is different now. I mean, there's so many different ways that you could be not ready by the time you finish your draft. So it also helps with that blank page fear or anxiety around, like, how do I get started? It's like, just start anywhere. In fact, I don't even like to start with the introduction paragraph. I usually like to have my outline, and then I have my my planning tools there, like my topic and my keywords and the things that I want to keep in mind while I'm writing. And then I just usually start in the part that makes me the most excited. I usually do introduction, conclusion. I usually do introduction last and conclusion first. and then they get revised at the end anyway. Drafting specifically. So number one tip is to, and this section is much more about tips, create an outline. Number one thing to do before you even start drafting, before you even start writing anything, create an outline. It helps you focus as you write. The items in your outline, the bullet points in your outline will become headings later. And we'll talk about headings in a minute. The next tip is be concise. So start out writing short, simple sentences. It might sound choppy, but that's okay. It should be one thought or opinion per paragraph. You really don't want more than, I don't know, I don't want to give you an absolute number. You don't want more than 5 sentences in your paragraph. Even that feels long right now. Paragraphs can totally be 1 sentence long on the web. That's very acceptable. And then the third thing about drafting is talk to your audience. Imagine that they are there in front of you. Don't put separators in, like talking in a passive voice. You want to maintain an active voice. I did this, not I thought I would do this. I chose this fabric because of whatever. Not, I wanted to choose a fabric that would be. Stay in the active voice as though you were talking to somebody about your project. Use I instead of we. Make it more personal. There are times when you want to use we. For example, if you are writing on behalf of a team, or you are writing copy that will be representing a company or a group of people's thoughts. But when you're writing about your own work, just be you. Editing. Okay. So like I said, draft, write everything you have in your head, and just get it down on paper, virtual paper, however you like to write, however you feel most productive. And then walk away, like get a good night's sleep or leave it for several hours, because you become too close to it and you don't have the ability to look at it objectively and to make the edits that you're going to need to make, because you probably 8 times out of 10 will have to chop things out or rearrange things. So editing, tips for editing. You want to look for ways to make your text easy to scan. So like we talked about, people scan pages on the web. They don't really read through them thoroughly unless they're very, very interested. So those headers that you created in your outline, use those, put them right in as headings and write a paragraph underneath them. Adding bulleted lists makes more white space, like more empty space that frames your writing, makes the pieces of text look more inviting and easier to read, easier to consume. Choose your words carefully so that you are not alienating your audience, getting too technical or too passive in your voice, and that you're using your keywords. And that will help boost your SEO rankings, but it will also help tie your writing back to the relevance that you thought about in the planning stages. You want to scan your writing for word choice and tone. And I have a couple of links in this section that are neat little tools. One creates a word cloud from your article. And I don't know if you are familiar with word clouds, but they, let's do it. Actually, let's do it. We're here right now. Oh, here, we'll do one of my projects from my portfolio. There we go. Look at all that. Look at all that text. All right, so I'm gonna just copy the first part of this. And we will analyze my writing with the word cloud. So it's scanning the text to see what my main words were and what the, okay. So I used the word Greek a lot. And I used the word used a lot. So that's interesting. And this actually looks okay. It's got a lot of words, which is good. So I'm varying my word choice. And it doesn't have an overall negative tone to it. Sometimes you get through writing something and you can put it through a tool like this and realize that the biggest words, the largest words, so the words that are used more often or have the most weight in this text sample that I gave it, are all sort of emotionally driven towards some emotion, like anger or something negative. And if that's not the tone you're going for, then you might want to change your phrasing or your word choice so that your cloud comes out less angry, less, I don't know, less confrontational, maybe, whatever you want. But this is a neat little tool that that can help you analyze your writing once you've got a draft. Yeah, if you have negative words that are standing out, like the word Greek and used and words all kind of stand out here. If these were negative words, then I might want to go back and edit my text for negativity. and look for the keywords that you were thinking about in your planning stage. If they don't turn up, then you might want to go back and rethink some of your writing. Yeah, and then synonyms. So I have this great link, and it's actually stuck on my work computer. I did not get a chance to send it to myself, which gives you alternate word choices. It's better than thesaurus.com, and I can't remember the name of it, but I will have to get back to you. You can put in a word and it gives you, it might be like related words, or, oh my gosh, it is called related words. This is a tool that someone turned me onto really recently, and I just immediately fell in love with this. So let's just, was a word I used really often. If I want to vary my language, used. Here are a whole bunch of synonyms for used, and the darker they are colored, the more relevant they are. But I can also find describing words or words related to it using reversedictionary.org, which is also cool. This has helped me improve the, like my mother would say, expand your vocabulary. It helps me think of a different word if I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot. And you want to consider changing up the words you use, using synonyms, except where consistency for those words is important. So if you are, if I'm trying to think, like if you're writing about a specific object, And there are a couple ways that you could describe that object, but you want to be consistent throughout the article so you're not confusing people. So like one of the examples that immediately comes to mind is that in my consulting practice, I would call the people that pay me to do work for them my clients. And the company that I work for now, they're not clients, they're customers. And we're very clear about that. And we always call them customers. In this context, though, it would be more variable. So if you're writing about trying to think of an example that is not so specifically about what I do. If I were using, okay, too bad, I'm just going to. So I do a lot of calligraphy, and I can use I use a tool to write with that can generically be called a pen. That might be confusing for people who think about pens in a modern context, ballpoint pen, for example. And I might want to be more specific and say that I used a quill pen. People will probably know what I mean by quill, but if I start changing the word that I used throughout the post, and at first I say quill, and then I say stylus, and then I say fancy word for writing utensil that I have never heard pronounced, calame, Calame. Tamsin, do you know this word I'm talking about? Like a reed pen. Those are different objects. Am I still talking about a pen? Am I still talking about a writing utensil? So you want to make sure that you're consistently calling certain objects throughout your text the same thing. So vary your vocabulary unless it counts.
Is there a place for a glossary in your articles then?
There can be, but I would not assume that someone will go look it up. They'll just get confused and leave. Web users are a lowest common denominator. Readers are a lowest common denominator. Because you don't know who they are. You always have to assume that they are there for something specific. And if what you're presenting is too confusing, even if it contains the information they want, they're just going to leave. They're very fickle and they have very short attention spans. You could create a glossary, but I would not count on people reading it. You could explain what you mean by pen, and this is the convention I'm going to use going forward in this article, or you could explain the differences between different types of pens. But if that's not what the user's there to read, they're going to skip to the next section. And then if they find a word they don't understand, they may or may not take the time to look it up. So you can't guarantee that. There are some tools out there, and I'm sure that there's a plugin for WordPress where you come across a word in a piece of text and it has a little dotted line underneath it. And if you hover your mouse over it, it will pop up a little box that tells you the definition of that word. And I think those are pretty neat for very technical explanations or jargon words. But you definitely want to be conscious of that when you're editing your writing. Is this too specialized? Do I need to explain some of these terms? And actually watching out for jargon is the next item, the next tip under editing, is making sure that you are explaining any more complicated terms with just a couple of words or a short sentence. I use a quill to write with. That is a pen made from a feather. Simple, short explanation. The person can just, oh, okay, and read on. So either you want to explain your jargon or what you feel might be specific technical terms, or use that strategy of letting somebody else define it for you and link to a full explanation somewhere else, just to keep the understandability high. The best way to know if you have jargon or if you are changing between active and passive voice, or if you're overusing certain words, is to ask someone else to read your work. And that's a really important tool when you are writing something for the web, because if you, well, I think it's important anyway, no matter where your writing is going to be published, having somebody who isn't as intimately familiar with your research or your topic is very valuable and can give you a lot of good feedback to help make it clearer or help make it flow better for somebody who doesn't understand it as well, for example. Okay, then we come to polishing. So up until now, you don't even have to have been writing this in WordPress. Like I talked about before, I don't mind drafting things in the WordPress editor directly, but if you're using a Google Doc or something like that, you probably haven't even created your post yet. And that's okay. The last step is polishing, and that's where I am definitely using the editor, because it will show me what that white space looks like around my headings. It will show me where I might have a big block of text, and I will want to put in an image or a media file or a graphic of some kind of chart or table that can help illustrate my point. If you break up your text with, remember that you want smaller, easier to read pieces, and you don't want big, huge blocks of text, because it's going to look like way too much and people are just gonna bounce. they're just gonna leave your site and look somewhere else. So looking at your writing in a visual way can show you where you might want to add those images or supporting visual materials. I like to wait until this stage to even find my images, usually, unless I've taken the pictures myself, like it's some sort of process topic. I like to save searching for images till the end of my work, because until this stage, because I can get caught up in finding images. I'm quite a visual person, and I can get lost in finding images for hours, and it really derails my writing process. So focusing on the information and what I want to say first, and then looking at it in a visual way on a web post really helps me be choosy about what images I'm looking for. So while I'm drafting, I might just put in parentheses or something, like a little note to myself, maybe actually I often use square brackets because parentheses are more often used in my writing, but then I can search for square brackets later, and I'll leave myself a little note like, find a picture of the statue of David to put in here, or find an image of a quill, insert image here, so that I know where it should go in context, but I don't spend time looking for it, because I might decide later that section's not necessary, and then I'll have done all that image research for nothing, because I would much rather say, okay, now it's time to look for images and give myself a good amount of time, instead of trying to bring myself back into the writing headspace from the browsing image headspace, because they're different for me. And that's my process, and you don't have to take that on board, but I try to do that in the polishing step, because the polishing step is really about, you're happy with the text, you've got everything revised the way you want it, and now you're working on the presentation part. So once you've got headings and your content in your page, and you've seen where images will help break up the text or help add context to what you're explaining in the text, publish it as, or preview it, publish it as a draft, save it as a draft, or preview it, and step back. How does it look from 5 feet away? Are the chunks of text small? Do they have headings? Can you see the next heading when you scroll? Because if you can't see the next heading and that space isn't being taken up by an image, are you saying too much in that section? You want to try to keep it short or shorter, or break it up in a different way. Yeah, and then adjust to those visual elements until you're ready to publish it online. And that is the last thing that I have. That's the end of writing for the web. So besides leaving out copyright information completely, does anyone have any questions or thoughts they want to share or anything like that?
What if you want to take a current blog and move the content into WordPress? Is that doable?
Oh yeah, that's easy to do. Yep, you would just have a browser window open to the new place where you want to put it, and a browser window open to viewing the information that's published, and you just copy it from where it's published into a new post or page, depending on the content. We talked about that last night. And then there it is.
My question is, okay, so I've done all this writing and I've cited some sites that back me up. Where do I put that information on a web-based, what am I trying to say? Like before I publish it, where do I put that information? Is it much like a university paper where you put it at the bottom, or how do you cite that?
So you can, there in an academic paper where you would use bibliography or any context where you would use a bibliography or citation table or something like that. You can do that on the web. WordPress does not handle footnotes spectacularly. You can do them, but they're not necessarily intuitive. So you can have a list of resources at the end. And in the SCA context, we kind of like to see that in our documentation, I think. We're often encouraged to add a bibliography. And sometimes the bibliography can be great scanning material as well. Like, what sources did they use? Ooh, there's one that I haven't had the chance to go through yet. Like I didn't know about that one, or that's new to me, or something like that, right? It can be exciting to find those in bibliographies. But another way to do it is, like we were talking about with everything is part of the internet. We can link to those sources. So if you're citing an article, you can do it just right in context. You can say, I did, I found this research at the Louvre, and you make at the Louvre into a link and put the page you got it from right in there. I want to be careful, because if you're publishing your own work about a project you made, something you made, let's say, and you are talking about getting the techniques from there or the image from there or something like that, that's putting the link to it in line, in context in the paragraph is fine. If you are writing it with the intention to enter some sort of ANS competition or online display or something like that, then you probably do want to list it as a citation separately. You can still link it in context, but you probably still want to add it at the bottom. I think that, I don't know for sure, but just going off of my experience entering and judging these types of things, it is really nice to see the list of citations or list of bibliography sources. And I don't think, and I'm making an assumption here, I think that people would say things like, where is this information, if you don't include it as a separate list as well. I might be wrong about that, but I wouldn't take that chance. I would still include it. And this is like a really specific SCA example. So that might not apply to writing in for a wider audience or a wider context.
Alicia, there is a question in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
How to determine grade level of writing?
Oh, yeah. I can add a link to some resources about that. There are ways to kind of figure that out. And yeah, grade level in quotes is right, because oh yeah, readability. Somebody just posted a thing about in the chat. Right, yes, okay, so grade level being in quotes because there are different standards for what is considered grade level, or what the nuances are of this is the difference between 4th grade and 5th grade reading level, right? What the qualifications are is a little bit different between the Flesch Kincaid grade level score, and there's another one that's like, I think it starts with an S. Oh, did somebody just post it? Oh no. But yes, there are tools, and there's one built into Word that shows the readability score. And that's, you want it to be, you don't want the readability score to be too difficult depending on who you're writing for. Now, if you are writing something that you want to be reviewed by academia, then adapting that style to the web might be in your best interest. But for the broader category of web visitors, like I said, the web visitor is not a specific person. It is your, like I said, your lowest common denominator, like the person who is going to be, or I guess the personification of someone who is going to be coming to your page most often. And that is a person who is not necessarily invested in your work. Like, they don't know you or what you've been doing. They've followed a link here from somewhere else that has told them that the keywords they're looking for exist on this page, and they're here to find them. Oh, hoping I'll touch on accessibility, such as adding descriptions to images. Yes. Yes, and we're going to talk about that in the media section. And I will be honest, I've had a headache all day today that Advil will not touch. And my preparation for the media portion is so scattered that I just don't even feel confident in telling you all about it. I feel like I have the high potential to confuse you more than I would help you at this point. But yeah, we can definitely talk about accessibility in terms of images. And we talked about it a little bit with copyright too. So what Adele's asking about here, adding descriptions to images, is something that we did in the, I'm going to flip back to my, let's see, our example from last night, where we had this image. There we go. Oops. And we can add alt text or alternative text here, which describes the image or the purpose of the image in the article context. We can also add a caption here, that can describe the image. What happens, so when we talk about accessibility, when we're talking about web accessibility, we're talking about readers, site visitors who usually have some sort of limited vision or limited color differentiation, and they need concessions to be made in order to digest the content of the page. So that could mean some sort of visual impairment or being completely blind or color blindness or something like that. And the most common way that people use the web is using what we call a screen reader. So it's a special browser that will read out the contents of the site to you, so you don't read it yourself. And when it comes across an image, some funky things can happen. If the image is not important to the context of the text, it will then you don't have to put a description in that alternative text. Many places don't. And that's kind of a shame because images do enrich the content. But if you put a description in this alternative text, if the image can't be loaded, or which can be a bandwidth problem, an internet connectivity problem, or it can be read by a screen reader, it will read out that alternative description instead of showing you the image. So it's good to be very descriptive in those cases. If it's a purely decorative image, like maybe there's a little swirl or something that is meant to frame the text or something, I don't know. But it's not important in making the point you're trying to get across in the text, then you shouldn't really put a alt text value in there, because then the screen reader will stop and read it. So I was actually talking to someone earlier today about the way that WordPress and many sites that use the latest version of HTML put images into text, and it's really not ideal for accessibility, which isn't really interesting. Accessibility is its own specialty within web development, and it is a very good skill to have if you are in that field, because there is a high demand for companies to make sure that their websites meet certain minimum standards for accessibility, because companies like Microsoft want their sites to be a natural user experience, whether you are vision impaired or not. They want you to still be able to, I don't know, buy an Xbox or something. Like they're very concerned about it, and rightly so, that information should be accessible to everyone. So it is pretty complicated. It can get pretty complicated, but the short answer by way of a very long story is that you should add alternative text or alt text to your images if they relate to the text. And I'm saying that despite this earlier conversation today where this accessibility person was telling me that is exactly the way that WordPress implements that, and not just WordPress, but the worldwide standards for the HTML, latest version of the HTML markup language, they actually don't do it in an ideal way. So that's still my advice for right now, until we can make it better. I saw the chat flash a couple more times. I'm going to check it. Yeah, links is probably the most popular. Yes. So the comment is about accessibility in regards to the text is to consider the font style and size, and the level of contrast between the text and the background. So controlling font and size, font style, so the way, the shapes that the letters take on the screen, and the size are things that you can set in your website, but that can be changed by the person using the browser. So if I find this body text here too small for me, I can actually just make it bigger. And now I'm viewing this website at 150% magnification. And so this is much easier for me to read. And this drives people who are used to designing things for print publications up the wall. They can't, it used to be much more common, but I used to have a lot of conversations. So what I was saying was that this level of magnification, or how much of the website is visible in the browser window, is not up to the person making the website. It's not within my control. So I have to plan for, what if they make the text a lot bigger? Or what if they need to make it smaller? But having good contrast between the background color and the text color is very important for people with more limited sight, because they rely on that contrast to show them the shapes of the letters. And there are websites that you can go to where you can put in the exact colors of your text and your background, and it will give you a score, an accessibility score that says, yes, this is good enough contrast, or no, you need to improve the contrast. And I can't remember what there's a threshold that is a widely accepted standard for accessibility that says exactly how much contrast there needs to be in order for it to be readable. So. Let's see, what else does the chat hold? Links, LYNX, Links is the name of the one of the most popular, if not the most popular, screen reader browsers in use today. So yes, if you would like to see what a website experience is like for someone who's using a screen reader, you can use Links. Or yeah, apparently, okay. So also, if you're posting files, put them in PDF as much as possible, as that has an excellent screen reader built in that your reader can use versus other file formats. Okay, this actually brings up a really great point too. When should you put your text in a document, and when should you write it as a post? And this is something that I'm actually thinking about a lot with a lot of the content we have available in the kingdom. So we have people who have written Word documents or Excel spreadsheets to make things like gate sheet templates, or handbooks for different things. And the first thing to remember is that unless it is a PDF format, Adobe PDF format, it can be downloaded and changed. So that may or may not be desirable for you. So for example, if you are posting something to your portfolio or project to your portfolio, and you want to attach the documentation that you wrote up, that you printed out and brought with you to your ANS competition, for example, you could definitely share that, but you should definitely share that as a PDF. Otherwise, people could go in and edit your work. The things that you want to put in PDF are things like, there's less and less of it these days, but things that are in documents like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, PDF, are not as easily indexed by search engines. So they are harder to find than a post or a page would be. So all of the results that come up will be weighted heavily toward sites that have pages and posts, plain text, rather than it being in Word format or Excel format. So what I am looking at is trying to convert a lot of the content that we have in trapped, for lack of a better word, a lot of the content we have trapped in PDFs that could really help people more if they were articles. For example, there's a lot of content around being an event steward and things to remember about being an event steward, or things to do if you're planning an event, that are trapped in PDFs. And we could easily make them short little web articles. We could take one PDF, one 10-page PDF, and make it into 40 little articles that could help inform someone specifically about different aspects of event stewarding, for example. So yes, post files. Make sure that you're thinking about who you're wanting to give this file to, and whether or not you want them to be able to change it themselves later. And then think about the fact that it will bury your information for search features, whether you're searching on a website or you're searching in Google. And it's not going to bury it completely, but it will show up below content that is easier to access. Althea also says PDF also is readable by nearly anyone or fillable as a form, whereas programs like Word may be dependent on the type of computer and software someone has. Right, you need to own Word. Microsoft Office is a very good example of proprietary software. You have to have a copy of the license, a valid copy of the license, in order to use that program. Microsoft does not offer a free substitute. There are a lot of programs that are free that can read Word format. Google Doc is one of them, but you can't just assume that anyone can open a Word document. It's not as easy as PDF. PDFs can be edited, that's true, but again, you need proprietary software from Adobe, and you pay a licensing fee, and you pay a high licensing fee from Adobe to be able to do that, and not everybody. That creates a barrier to that information. So I would definitely stay away from, well, no, there are times when you want to use things like fillable forms in PDF, like if you really need them to be printed out, if you really need a hard copy of it. But to save paper or to digitalize your process of why you're using the form, definitely consider using a web form instead. Yes.
Okay, I had to switch the computer on for the right microphone. I appreciated your discussion of word choice and that unless the word has a very precise meaning, that you're varying your word choice. That's one of the things that drives me nuts when I'm reading something and I see the same word used 4 times in 2 sentences. But I guess my question is, kind of, I guess, on the quote unquote above the fold concept. I will be honest, I use a desktop computer. I do not use mobile devices. So I have no idea how things look on those. So how does that vary things and the above the fold consideration if you're trying to write for multiple text, or that you think people are predominantly going to be reading it on a mobile device? Does that alter that?
It just really underscores the point of using that reverse pyramid model and putting your most important points or conclusions at the beginning. Mobile is a much smaller format, and the layout changes, and that can work in your favor or not. People are also more used to scrolling on mobile. So if you have a header image that takes up the whole screen, they're likely going to just swipe through that until they get to the text. But they're going to be swiping through, scanning for those headings, scanning for an image. You're never going to be able to be sure what will catch someone's eye. You just have to focus on making the whole thing be scannable and easy on the eyes, easy to digest, easy to flip through and find what they need. I mean, the next time that you read a website, if you stop and think about it, you will notice that you are scanning. I mean, I can pretty much guarantee that. Even if you're reading the news in the morning, it's very rare that we start with the first word and we go all the way to the end of the page to the last word, no matter where you're reading it. And if you think about the fact that you really can't control at what size or how much of the screen is going to be visible to any reader at any time, it really just reinforces that point that you've got to start with your best stuff and then back it up as you go along. Thank you, everybody. This was great. Yes, there is a way to see how your page will look in mobile. We could do that right now, actually. We only did it's on the editing screen. We only did the preview in, everything is 150%. Okay, I just went back to normal size. So if we click on the preview button, we have the choice here of tablet and mobile. So let's choose tablet. And it changes here, but we can also put it into a new tab. Why did it not show me? Well, I don't know why it didn't show me this narrower view. Maybe it, I don't know. I can't explain it. But this is what it would look like in mobile. I mean, in tablet. And then let's go to mobile. Oh, that's the bottom. Come on. I'll see how our image got changed. Try and make this fill up the whole thing. There we go. So it changes the shape of the text a lot. And you just don't know. Yeah, and you'll hear that term responsive. Responsive means that it is a comparable experience, that the browsing the website is a comparable experience no matter what size screen you're using to view it. So whether you're viewing it on a mobile screen like this simulates, or a tablet, or the desktop, they should all be, why does it keep shoving me down to the bottom of the document? It should all be a very similar experience. It won't be the same because of the size difference, but you should be able to do the same thing on a mobile site, like put something in a shopping cart or make an image bigger, like click on it and zoom in, as you can do on a larger screen like a tablet or desktop. So making the website respond to the size of the browser you're using to look at it is what they consider a responsive website. And that's all done with, we mentioned it briefly yesterday. That's all done with CSS, cascading style sheets. Have I overwhelmed you with information? Yes, I've overwhelmed you. Okay, that's good to know. In a good way? Like, are you going to be like a plant where I've overwatered you, but if I just stop for a little bit, it'll all sink in and then you'll be good to go on? Yes. Okay, good. That's what I'm going for, actually. I think of that plant analogy a lot. Like, okay, I've just consumed a lot of information, but if I let it settle, I can go on. Okay, good. Oh, good. Halima,
I think you took a very technical thing and made it simpler for us.
Good. That's also a goal of mine, always. I said that phrase a lot yesterday, democracy in publishing. I really have, I don't know, I have a lot of conviction around that myself. I don't think that technology should be a barrier to being able to post your stuff. One of the things that I love about the internet is that it connects people through shared interests across distance like that. I mean, you can, if you are interested in what you think is the most specific niche thing on the internet, you will find somebody else who's also that interested in it. And unless you put your work out there or your interests out there, you won't find those people. Like, everybody should be able to put their voice online if they want to. Don't let technology be a barrier.
I will admit that having worked with WordPress last spring for Athenaeum, I'm more comfortable with what we did through this last 2 nights. I think had I not been exposed to WordPress before, I might be in a little bit of a cloud of confusion.
That's good feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the best feedback is you did, like telling someone nicely that they didn't do a good job. So that's like where we can improve the most. So feel free to give constructive but critical feedback. Don't tell me I'm a terrible person. I don't think I can handle that right now. But
well, then that would be an outright lie for anyone to say that.
Well, what is that quote? I have seen it recently. Everyone is the villain in someone else's story, right? Like, I try to be a nice person. I try to be helpful, and somebody else might say that I'm not. So I don't know. I just try. Marl, link tag ideas. Red text online background, auto.
I was responding to the person saying, now I have ideas.
I know. Those are not good ideas. You should try them out on the accessibility tester site there. That's what I'll say about that. No, if you think of things later that ways that I can improve this, or things that would be,
But thank you for all of your work. This was really awesome.
Yep.
yay, I'm glad.
Mm.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for hosting me.
Mhm.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you for teaching.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure.
yes. For me as well. Thank you. I will say goodnight to everyone.
Good night.
Good
and
night.
thank you.
Good night. I can't find my button. I'm gonna stop sharing. I have to stop sharing before I can go. There we go.
Good night.
Bye.